Welcome to A Magical Life, Health, Wealth and Weight Loss. I'm your host, Magic Barclay, lead practitioner at Holistic Natural Health Australia and #1 best-selling author. In this podcast, I aim to give you practical tips on how to accelerate and sustain your health, increase your financial, spiritual and emotional wealth, and to look at something that haunts many of us needlessly, weight loss. In some episodes, I'll have guests available to give you even more tips, but in others, the floor is yours. Drop us a line at A Magical Life Podcast on Facebook and let me know what you would like to know more about. Now, sit back and enjoy, because it is time for you to create and truly discover a magical life. Welcome back to A Magical Life. I'm your host, Magic Barclay. Today, James Heppner joins us. James likes to think of himself as an artist of experience. His passion is to create transformational experiences for himself and others as a way to explore what it means to truly live fully alive. James is a results coach and founder of Weekly Wins and Losses podcast and weekly global community call. He helps people in their journey to embrace all of life, both the wins and the losses equally. James helps you firmly establish the mental and physical courage needed to do difficult things while guiding you to activate your ability to leverage the good news that lies at the heart of both a win and a loss. People from around the world find James when their way of handling losses just no longer works, and when leaving 50% of life on the table is no longer an option. James's current client list ranges from well-known professionals and executives to average, ordinary humans, both of which are deeply hungry and curious towards the worthy work of breaking into and establishing a brand new dimension of life. Wow. Welcome, James.
Thank you for having me on. And it was an honor to be invited onto your show. And by the way, your name, Magic, that's spectacular. So let's see what we can create together.
Thank you. Now, look, James, I always ask my guests the same 3 questions, and everyone gives me such a different answer. It's kind of amazing how diverse people are. So here's your first one. What can your expertise do to accelerate health? Now, not just physical health, but also emotional and spiritual health.
What can my expertise do? That's fascinating. Some people, they ask me, James, are you an expert at anything? And, to be completely honest, in another part of my life journey, not at present, but over a decade ago, I would have said, well, I'm an expert here, there, and a few places. And so I have learned in life, humbleness is probably ultimate state of leadership. But, if you ask that question, I would say that one of the things specifically what I think about, mental and physical health, we live inside of our life. We don't live inside of another person's life. And so inner acceptance. And I think so often acceptance is just a word and it's a catchphrase, but I think beneath acceptance lies tolerance. And so if we cannot build the inner musculature to tolerate in a joyful way what we observe, I think there's a problem. And so to accept is to tolerate and to enjoy tolerating and to, unfold in real ways and to observe what that looks like. And then to say, wow, that was in there, and so I think to get playful with the presence that we actually all are, instead of being so harsh. And of course, harshness leads to shaming and blaming, which never tends to work. So yeah, my work tends to have a bend towards a whole bunch of inner work, and inner work, of course, is the thing and is the power that creates anything from the external, especially if it's going to be sustainable, it's got to come from within. So thanks. That was a great question.
Talk about wealth here. Now, people think that's just the financial wealth, but we miss the personal and emotional wealth, kind of the personal growth, I guess. So what are your top 3 tips to creating wealth?
Very simply, I would say when you align with the foundation of life, life supports more of life. At current, I'm looking at your logo. It's a hand, and then there's some sprouts coming from it, life supporting life. And so you must be about regeneration. You must participate with the ecosystem of regeneration. So that's number one. And so that's, like you say, wealth, physical, mental, financial, whatever it ends up being. The next piece that I would say is very important, and that is we must have a leaning towards that life owes us nothing. When life owes us nothing, we end up realizing we are wealthy because wealth is abundant. It's everywhere. It's not a bank account. Wealth, often people will look at it as a sometime down the road experience. However, arrival happens at birth. And the next one, when I think wealth is a state of mind. So there's a lot of state of mind here, but the concept is, and I repeat these things to myself every day, I've created these things, and that is nothing traps me, everything frees me. So wealth is a decision. And when something happens in your life, you get to participate with it, and that is to utilize it, or you get to be about trying to eliminate. And of course, when we try to eliminate things in life that are present, it seems not to work very well. If we try to flee our presence, it just seems not to bode well for us or anybody else around us. So
I just want to sit with that comment for a minute about decisions. I think people in general, I think we've kind of shied away from making decisions and really taking ownership and leadership of the direction of our lives. Why do you think that is?
Gosh, that's a great question. I think, just in my opinion, I think humanity, we all understand that without decision, nothing happens. The only thing is there's a wide divide between decisive decision and decision. Decision is just simply saying, well, I'm going to decide to do something about this. But a decisive one is one that brings a decision into action. And a decisive decision is a non-negotiable decision. A decision that isn't decisive lacks that absoluteness. And absoluteness, not to say we're going to plow things down and plow people or ourselves or our traumas over, because we have to be gracious. We have to lean in. We got to be sensible about things. But I think ultimately, we as humans, and I don't think that we mean to sidestep reality or fast track too quickly. I think most of us value that if we get to be if we get to be a part of something and participate with it, we all know that brings meaning and value. But I think there's an anxious striving in society, and it's kind of, I at least have observed, it seems like there's an undertow, and the anxious striving, supports people away from being present. And so they want things quicker than maybe what is there. They fear they're not progressing fast enough. And so I think a lot of it has to do with just fearing that we're not progressing fast enough. And I got a little tale, like one of the people that come to mind, and I study many people, but the one group of people that I think are pretty interesting, the Jewish people. The Jewish people, when it comes to Sabbath is an act of rejection for them. It's not an act of restriction. And so I think oftentimes, I think we've mellowed down the importance and the power of decision, because a lot of, I think, North Americans' variety of decisions comes through the lens of, well, I probably should decide on this, and so I should restrict myself away from certain things. And so, for example, when it comes to, Sabbath, I don't have a leaning towards whether to work on a Sabbath is good or not. I just think, for example, Western society, if we think of secular Christianity in North America, what does that look like? I mean, they have a Sabbath too, but if it's restriction, what does the human want to do? The human wants to not do that. So if you say I can't do something, the human typically says, well, no, I want to do it. But the Jewish people, when they were in slavery and they finally were freed from that, they made a pact that for them, not working on the Sabbath, so whatever that looks like a 6-in-1 rhythm, you just unplug for a bit. When you do that, that is our decision, our decisive decision to wrap around the idea that we don't need to consume or create more so we can consume more. So I'm going in a few different directions, but I think a lot of it has to do with fearing that we're not getting far enough, And then fearing we're not getting far enough is hard baked into production, and we fear we're not producing enough, so we can't consume enough. So I think it's a bit of a gluttonous concept, honestly.
Interesting answer. And look, James, we talk here about weight loss as well. This is our final standard question before we get into being fully alive.
Mm,
And I guess it kind of leads into being fully alive because many of us live our lives fearing weight or trying to change weight. So, have
mm.
you ever battled with your weight? If so, what was the trigger to losing it? And what can you offer the listeners who may be on this journey and, it's just stopping people being fully alive?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a fantastic way of languaging the question. And I like how you add a few more nuance than just simple weight loss, right? And there's something behind the weight loss. Gosh, I think magic, you say to anyone, including you say to your own body, I'm going to lose weight. The first thing the body wants to do when it hears lose, it thinks, no, I don't think I want to lose it. It fears that. And so there was a season in my life when I gained probably 30 pounds and didn't really know what the problem was. And so, of course, I continued along the lines of consuming supplements from a certain company, consuming their meal replacements, and not knowing what was behind it all. And what was interesting is in a different season, this company really actually helped me lose weight, but now I was gaining weight. I couldn't figure out what the problem was. And one day my wife comes home and she says to me, and we come from a heritage where there was a lot of gravies made with creams and different things. And then she says, I think we're going to bring some fats back into our diet. And I said, oh, baby, that's not what we want. Like I've got too much of that. And so she introduced me to this individual, and I began to consume quality fats, grass-fed butter, for example, grass-fed, grass-finished butter, and some healthy oils. And lo and behold, my energy just skyrocketed. And of course, on the concept of living fully alive, and I can't think of anything other than if there's not an energetic flow through our veins, we tend to question how fully we're capturing the moment. And so not to be fearful of when we don't have energy that we won't, be able to grab all of what is here for us. The word grab is interesting, but yeah, no, I absolute. So of course, when I started ingesting fat, to be honest, I lost 35 pounds. And I was so invigorated. I at that point in time captured and I chose a workout modality, and it was really simple. Like it's super, super. So they call me the self-help hacker. And part of that is because I also love biohacking. And so in self-help, we get real quick down to the base and foundational note of why you do what you do. And so when you can find the master switch and flip it, you get real quick on results. And so to say the least, so though I lost 35 pounds of fat, I have now regained 40 pounds, but it's not fat. It's something different. So my body looks a little different. I feel it's not about the look. I just feel great. And my passion in health is not for some significant purpose for appeal. It is so that, I have the stamina, I have the state to show up when I most need it. And I got 2 teenage boys, so they really enjoy running around and playing football and frisbee and all kinds of fun things. So
I really want to talk about what it is that you do with your clients. And can you just explain what fully alive looks like?
well, as the listeners will probably pick up by now, my gender, so I will classify myself as male, and I married a female, and my journey was like, I think for most people who show up primarily in their masculine state. So you can be female and also show up in masculine state. And I also have feminine in me because we, as a specific sex, we have all the sexes within us. So I can choose to flow within the feminine presence or the masculine. And let me just say it like this. I think to some degree, we all crave and hunger to have our life mean something, for us to have purpose. And often the masculine presence, the first half of life, is to produce and to bring and to provide. And at least in proverbial term, that was how I saw my role. And when primarily that no longer worked, and I gained most of my value through that. I mean, let's be honest. When 2008 rolled around and the real estate crisis, was upon us. I was in the real estate sector. I owned a few companies in that industry. Of course, what I'm going to be able to bring home is a little different. And I began to question my value. And I remember feeling things like, well, I'm losing now, or I'm not gaining what I thought I was going to gain. And there was a lot more of the perception and also real losses than gains and wins. And to be totally frank, I checked out of life. For 2.5 years, I slept. I found a way successfully. I don't know how, but I slept 18 and a half hours a day. I shouldn't say I don't know how. I consumed a whole bunch of melatonin and gravel. And that was part one of my story. I now live in part two. So for the last decade, I've had an insatiable love with life. And to be frank, I actually enjoy being on living ground, which is to feel it all and enjoy it all and experience it all instead of trying to eliminate. So what kept me in that, dystopic state for so long, for 2.5 years, was trying to eliminate, because I was trying to stay in my masculine element, not to feel, appointing what I was feeling as a problem. Perhaps I was the problem. And so let's say it like this, during that season, and when I erupted from that season, and when I transferred into where I currently am, as I said, I have an insatiable love of life, not in a, oh, I got it all figured out state, but it's just, I really, really, really genuinely enjoy being able to participate with everything that's in front of me, and not choosing preference, and not just saying I want the things that I have preference for, but I also want the things that I don't have preference for. And the reason that I want those things in my life is I am not nature. I am not God. I'm not universe. I am part of, and I have to find a way and have the courage to say, I must harmonize around nature. I must harmonize around something bigger. I am not the thing. I'm not ultimately the thing. And so during that season, when I transitioned from one way of living, meaning mostly external, I began to build a relationship with the intrinsic parts of myself. And I lean heavily on just observing my wife and her feminine element. And to be totally honest, listeners, if you care to, at some point in time, either during this talk or after, go online and just type in, go to the Google or whatever search engine you're on, and type in emotional wheel and print it off and ask yourself the question, which of these emotions do I feel frequently? And what we find in whether it's North America or around the world, I have clients from all over the planet, to be honest. What we find, and this is consistent, I find with all of my people, that there's a limited scope and range of emotion. And to the exact degree that you can feel emotion is to the degree that you're going to feel life. Like, think about it. Somebody who gets cremated or buried or whatever the case is, they're no longer emotionally here with us. They can't feel. So if somebody can't feel, we call them brain dead, or we have these labels for them. And so the idea that you want to get behind is when you observe that emotional wheel and you take a pen and you circle the emotions that you feel, and you realize which emotions you don't feel. And typically there's like perhaps 8 to 10 categories. Most people want to feel or say they feel joy and perhaps a little sadness. And so it's maybe 2 or 3 of the categories that they have active time of non-anxiety inside of, or even anxiety is a feeling. So some people say like, well, I have an anxiety, but I want to get away from it. Really, anxiety is what uncertainty actually is. So don't get me wrong, if we stay stuck in an emotion, that's a problem. But every emotion, the purpose behind it is to prime us to take proper action for the next movement. So living fully alive for me, let's just say it like this. When I exited from part one of the story about suffering and into where I currently live, I remember thinking one day, if I would consider most people the way I observe, and my dad was a pastor of a mega church, so he would often visit the people who were dying, and he would, he'd come back and after he'd sat with them, at their bedside, and then they passed on, he would say things like, "Oh, this human had his moment." And I remember thinking, what does that mean? And as I studied it more and as I talked with him about things, he said, you know what? I think they just lived. I think they just finally woke up. Like, life looks like this. And so consider, when somebody passes away, they'll often say things like, "Oh, I love you so much, and I wish I would have spent more time with you, and maybe perhaps not worked as much," or different things. And what's interesting is in that moment, they begin to realize running from death doesn't work. Running away from the death or the idea that things aren't going to work out exactly as I thought, how most of us live life, to be honest. Like, we create an idea, for example, we're going to get married or start a business or whatever we're doing. And we don't realize that the inevitability of this thing dying, or the concept of it turning out exactly the way we thought, it never happens. So we literally need to do and practice having a funeral for the concept of how will it go? It doesn't turn out the same way. And I think what I'm trying to say here is building a muscle towards when it doesn't work out, building that early and often in our life. And we have invitations to do that everywhere because, like I said, anything you plan out, no matter how strategic and laser pointed you get, it'll never be exactly the way you thought. And so to build a muscle for it now means that you actually begin to realize, I'm feeling all these things. And instead of saying, I don't want to feel them, well, what does it help doing that? If you say you don't want to feel it, you're just probably going to feel it more. You're going to have to create more willpower. And the more willpower you draw down, the sooner you're going to feel exhausted. You have spirit power, or you have this persona, this willpower, like to like willfully just plow through, has to give rise to another layer of regeneration that's there to support you. And so living fully alive for me is simply to say, and there's many things, but what comes to heart for me right now, what I hear myself care about most is that we develop a relationship and a healthy relationship with all emotions, because they're actually all helpful. It's time, it's a time to love and a time to hate. It's not either or, it's both and. So while we love something, we simultaneously don't like another thing. And people say, well, if it's, love is great, but hate is dangerous. Well, both can be dangerous. You can weaponize both. If you get stuck in love, just like love, meaning all I do is just make sure you're okay. Well, love isn't like that. Love is to say, what's happening inside of me now? Am I giving and receiving to myself at the exact same time? Am I feeling love? And love is when it happens, when receiving and giving comes together. And even when it comes to hate, like, what do I hate? Like, if you don't actually hate something, you're probably not going to take action. You're just going to lay in your creature comforts. So again, hate is not a state of being. Hate is an emotion we feel for a moment so that it primes us to take the next proper action. So I don't know if that answers your question, but living fully alive to me is just like feeling everything and utilizing everything, because nothing is wasted on this earth, nothing. But we get to decide if something will be wasted.
I think we also shy away from some of those feelings that maybe feel uncomfortable. We try to make everything convenient. We try to make everything happy and wholesome and feeling great. And we've kind of, as a human race, my observation anyway, is that we don't want to feel the uncomfortable side. We don't want to be cold, so we put the heater on. We don't want to be hot, so we put the air conditioner on. We don't want to have a difficult conversation, so we avoid it. We avoid the confrontation. We just try to keep ourselves just right. And to me, that's not truly living. You have to have, the polarization. You have to have the icky feeling about something and the difficult conversations.
I love that. Something that's just stirring inside of me when you say we don't want. It's so interesting. We're living, and because we're here, you'd argue because people aren't just checking out, that we actually are admitting by default, by how we're showing up, that we want to be here. So if we want to be here, then it's kind of silly to think that we wouldn't want to do what life is. Life is breathing in and breathing out. When you breathe in, you take it in. When you breathe out, you let it go. Every time you breathe out, you're dying to something. Your cells are never staying the same. I'm not the same person who I was 15 minutes ago. There's certain cells that have died, certain cells that have started coming to life. So the rhythm of life, harmonizing with life, the reality and the truth. I mean, I got to be careful when I say truth, but I do believe this is universal truth, is that there's a life-death cycle, and it isn't which one's better, which one is good, and which one do I want more than the other. It's like actually the only way that I can actually see clearly what's here, and that's the first step, see clearly what's here, is if I say, well, the reality is that I breathe in, I take in, and then I let go, and then so certain things die, like they go out, and then I take it in again. And so each moment we get to gasp that we get to participate with not, oh, I want less life or less death so I can have more life. Life isn't possible, to your point, unless there's polarity. Polarity creates the synergy that makes anything come alive. Think about, People often say, well, I want to, be on ground that isn't shaking. Actually, without things moving, it's dead. If things stop vibrating, it's dead. There's just nothing there.
Now, you talk about wins and losses, and we've kind of touched on that. To feel loss is not necessarily negative. We've kind of touched on that. What is it about wins and losses, I guess the balance of things, that's so important to your clients? Why are they seeking to embrace wins and losses?
Magic, I think you get it because I can hear in how you language the question. I think you get it. It's like my second son, he's 15 now, Harrison, he has high functioning autism, and his second name is Gray. And so often we say we want either black or white. And, the human puts and induces him or herself or itself into deep suffering, learned helpless behaviors when it is forced to decide which one's better. Is this one better than the other? An animal, for example, a dog, only ever when observing, when looking around, is looking for where's the greater safety or where's the greater danger. It's all that it's doing constantly when it's looking around. You and I, as humans, we can go into another state, which often happens. Like I'm just staring straight ahead and there's a set of doors in front of me. I'm not thinking about, are the doors safe or are they dangerous? I'm just observing the doors. And so what's fascinating, and by the way, the reason that I coined it wins and losses, this is what the survival self is constantly analyzing. Am I winning or am I losing? Is this good? Is this bad? That's what the survival state is doing. Now, granted, we have to go beyond survival state at some point in time and quite quickly, but we first have to reckon what our survival state is doing to finally give ourselves the opportunity to see something other than just making a choice away from some perceived danger or towards some perceived place of euphoric bliss. So in the center, in the middle of these two things lies Gray. People say, what? So we're going to just feel nothing, just feel like not feel the loss, not feel the win. Actually, it's opposite. We actually want to feel the deep win. We want to feel the deep loss because the deeper we feel things, the more we can connect with what's going on. Unless we feel it, we don't learn lessons. Unless we feel it, we don't pick up on nuance. Unless we feel it, that affects our empathetic state, not only towards ourselves, but when other people experience things. Imagine this: if you feel nothing and somebody says this is a big deal, and you say, no, it's really nothing. It's just kind of in the middle. It's nothing. What we're talking about, the middle here, is sacred ground where instead of you're just like peacefully floating away in some utopic storyline or in the clouds somewhere, which, by the way, if that's what people are interested in, have fun. That's just not me. For me, peace is from within. Instead of peace being out there somewhere, like, wouldn't it be nice if I could take a vacation? Or that's external peace. Internal peace comes, for me, in my definition, and the reason that my people want it as much as they do is, first, that you mentioned it earlier, and that is when onboarding losses the way that they're currently doing it isn't working out. It's no longer an option, meaning they've mined so much of the wins and they're looking for more success externally everywhere, even internally everywhere on the outside of them. And what they're not realizing, it's like acres of diamonds right in front of them. And so invariably people that find me are just sick and tired of trying to sedate themselves and provide themselves the illusionary wink that perhaps if we just keep doing the same thing, and people invariably get tired. They just say, now we need to be in a state of being. Being is a little different than just doing. The masculine presence brings things and does. The feminine presence is a receiver and is a creator of things. And so we want to develop both of these, but to the point on, bringing these things together, bringing it together, the way that we look at peace from the inside is ultimate peace is when we have electrifying peace. So it's not like we're just like closing your eyes and we're just like gone. Like I was on a podcast a little while ago with this girl who was a Buddhist monk, and she meditated, she say 16 hours a day for years and years and years. And she came to the realization that no matter how long she meditated, you still got to come down to earth. You still got to so you're here for a purpose. And so for me, it's like this: we get into a state of peace, and that there's a surge of power. If you think about taking electrical wires and putting them to water, your body's 80% of water. So electrifying peace that we feel from within. And so to be totally honest, I think you'd have to talk to my clients to see ultimately why they want to connect with me, and why they do this work. But I'll say it like this: majority of people, they want to build a muscle where they activate their superpower. So whether it's someone who's, identifies as a female who wants to be able to onboard the masculine presence and do more of that, they have it in them, but they want to develop that muscle. Or if it's a man, so a male who wants to activate more of the feminine spirit inside of him. And that, ultimately living fully live is when we activate both of those. And then we get to decide what's the most beneficial state to show up in. Is it that I need to be nurturing here? That's more of the feminine. Or do I need to be a little bit more assertive, perhaps? I'm not saying a woman isn't, or feminine isn't assertive, but it is to decide which state to utilize. That, of course, won't just solve for your own self-preservation. Because if you're doing that, you're just creating a storyline where you're controlling people to your perceived outcome. And people will feel this. And when they feel it, they're going to flee, because as soon as we recognize anybody's trying to control us, it's a version of slavery. And so autonomy and freedom is what we all fight for.
And just on that, without getting too controversial, why is it that the current generation, I guess the current generations, don't see autonomy as the golden value? Like, why are we so believing of media and of political figures and of entertainment figures? Why have we shied away from our own personal truth?
Mm-hmm. So beautiful. And perhaps it lies in the nuance. I stumbled into something a while ago. The difference between autonomy and freedom is quite radical, to be honest. I didn't know this until when this appeared, because exactly like you're saying, like we wonder, why is it that society does this? And it doesn't make sense. It seems so contradictory. Like we're like, this just doesn't, these things don't check out. The definition for autonomy is saying, I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it without any consequence. So the zero response, I don't want to be responsible for anything. I just want to do what I want to do when I want to do it without consequence. And to be honest, that's what a lot of people are currently doing. They say they're fighting for freedom, but really they're delivering autonomy. They're being autonomous people. It's like a child. The child says, I want to poop when I want to poop. I want to scream when I want to scream. I want to like yell when I want the soother, and I want there to be no consequence. Okay. Like don't reprimand me, or don't not come to see me, like come to the crib instantly. Okay. That's autonomy. Freedom is something that is way beyond autonomy. Freedom does this. Freedom says there's something within me. There's a passion that's here. And I happen to know that for me to activate this passion and bring it into the world, because it's my specific passion and unique obsession that I have, it's probably not going to be understood. It might not be understood very well. And so whether it's understood or not, the point is freedom says, and I choose to be responsible for it and to it. Therefore, a lot of people say they're fighting for freedom, but in essence, freedom is way too challenging for most people, because freedom demands and commands responsibility. And it may mean that people laugh at you. It may mean you get canceled out. It can mean many things, but freedom will ultimately, it bears consequence, and there's reality to it. So when I think about social media, I think a lot of people are being autonomous. It's like, they're just screaming, or, this or that and everything else. Which, I mean, to be honest, I think you need to find a platform or some place to get things out. I think that's fair. You need to get your emotion out. I was on a show a little while ago, and this gentleman, his dad committed suicide many years ago, and he himself committed suicide 5 years ago. And it was because he wasn't willing to get it out. And so I think we need these places of venting. But I think when I think about, like you were mentioning, the societal norm, I think we've all kind of been put to sleep on the beauty of going beyond seeking relief. And so to that point, as I was mentioning earlier, my dad was a pastor of a mega church and in a Christian setting. And I'll never forget, one day we were going for a drive, and there's this beggar, and I thought my dad was going to give him money, because to some people he gives money and other people he didn't. I didn't know why. And he says, well, if I give this person money, he's just going to go drink. I remember thinking, yeah, but he might need to. Like, he looks pretty desperate. And that took me on a journey where, to be totally frank with you, when I now see someone who needs something, like, even if I think and I'm quite certain they might buy another hit or consume another bottle of alcohol, they got this dazed look on them, I'll still part with $5 or 10, pass it along. Here's why. They're looking for what we all are looking for, which is relief. The only thing is, if you stay at relief. So, by the way, the bar can offer relief. A structure like church can offer relief. But at some point in time, so I am a spiritual faith-based person, but I don't attend a religious service, nor do I belong to a church or anything like that. Sooner but later, we must go beyond just seeking relief. Relief is, yes, please. However, we get satiated with just constant relief. We want to take responsibility at some point in time. So, I think that ultimately, I don't know if that answers your question. Sorry for that long runaround, but I think we seem to all be saying something. And what we're saying in this churning, like, this is a fourth churning we're in, we're poking at the structure. And I think ultimately, society, this is what's been done over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Every 100 years, this happens once, a fourth churning. So this isn't the first time we've gone through this. We're just poking at the structure because we're trying to hold them to a standard of being more responsible. And I think we have to be careful that we ourselves don't fall into a trance of relief. And that's what we think it looks like to be a human being. I think it's fair to say relief is fine for the moment, but we have to get to a place where it's like your icon. You have these green leaves and then you have this hand. Responsibility looks like, how will I attend to my response? How will I attend to? I've been gifted the opportunity to perhaps plant something in a garden. And how will I? Will I support life or will I pull from life?
I love that. Now, James, is there something else before we wrap up that you want to leave the listeners with?
I think just the nudging. When pain comes into your life, please accept it. Because if you don't, you'll likely have to go through a stage of learned helplessness. That happened for me. When pain showed up in my life, I tried to eliminate it. When I started utilizing what was there, then all of a sudden I transitioned. So I have an acronym that I created for pain. It's please accept inner nudgings. And if you accept inner nudgings, now your pain can allow you to feel and bear the pressure. And when you bear the pressure from all sides, by the way, not one side, from all sides, you're pressed from all sides. You can bear the pressure, and that pressure leads you to presence, a deep, abiding presence with yourself, where you hear the distinct notes of who you are. The noise reduces, the signal increases. And from that place of presence, you wake up to your purpose. You come home to your purpose because you're so present. All you can do is just become aware of who you've always been, way down deep inside. And from that place of purpose erupts passion, which is where your rebirth all takes you to a brand new life.
Now, people can find you at www.jamesheppner.com. So that's JamesHeppner.com. Before we let you go, we love giving our listeners freebies. What can you offer them? And is that there on your website?
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for asking. I currently have 2 freebies. The one freebie is we have a global, and you mentioned earlier, global weekly wins and losses virtual call. And to be frank with you, I can't think of a better way to bring new and raw truth to what your last week was really all about. This global call, it's a weekly, no charge call, happens every Friday at noon Pacific time. And so when you jump onto this simple call, it'll deliver a profound experience for you. And of course, I'm a little biased. I created this, but honestly, I can't think of a better way for you to clear the deck of all the unhelpful stings of last week's losses. And the reason we want to do this is so that when the new week begins, you're best able to launch out of the gate, invigorated and ready to take bold, courageous action forward. And of course, action without all the unhelpful sides of hesitation and delay. So I invite each one of you to show up and share as you wish, or simply observe others share a personal win and a personal loss that stood out for them from the past week. When you come, I'm going to help you understand and show you how to master the art. And who doesn't want to be prepared for anything? Win, lose, or draw. Come and learn authentically how to celebrate both a win and a loss in real time every time. And of course, the other free gift And this is something that I just launched. Let's be honest, listeners, I have been with you. I have been with humanity, and I have walked journeys with you, but we are now in a season of time. Let's just say it like this, with all of what's happening, in the global unrest, inflation rates rising, interest rates shooting up, gas prices skyrocketing. People like Tony Robbins say what's wrong in the world is always available, but so is what's right. And so instead of trying to hope and wish the world into a better place, it's time to make the most important decision any of us can ever make, and any of you can ever make, and that is to invest in yourself. And so I'm offering for a limited time, and by the way, I'll say it this way, this will expire, but I'm offering for a limited time, and it will also fill up because these things do. I've offered certain things before, not quite like this, but I'm just here saying I got to walk with you specifically, individually. I'm willing to offer a consultation, and I just call it a 45-minute strategic business life consultation. No charge, no strings attached. And this is where you're going to be able to regain the reins of your life. And you're going to gain clarity on exactly why you're stuck. We're going to move you directly towards your optimal outcome. So we're not going to be able to solve the world's problems, but we are going to be able to laser down, and I can together, you and I, we're going to co-create this. We're going to be able to spot exactly where you're stuck and what you can do about it. So my clients, what they say about working with me, they say things like they have a decrease in decision. They have an increase in clarity, confidence, and courage. They have an increase in fully capitalizing what's directly in front of them. They also say they have an increase in impact at work on their families and their communities, a decrease in pain and suffering, and a decrease in anxiety. And so, again, if you want to move beyond old stories, get clear on where you're headed so that you can shake your world, you can simply go to my website and you'll see a little pop-up. And in that pop-up, you can just go and say, yes, I'd like to have that. And that will draw you to my calendar, and you'll book a little time with me. And again, this will fill up. And so I encourage you there. And of course, I also have one-on-one coaching and group work. And of course, you can find all of that work for those that are passionate about wanting to learn more about me and potentially working with me one-on-one. That's also found on that website that you mentioned.
Fantastic. James, thank you so much for joining us. I've really, truly loved this conversation. It's been great.
Fantastic. It was an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And listeners, thank you so much for your time. Without you, we couldn't do this podcast. And, I just urge you, please go and leave us those Apple reviews, Spotify reviews, wherever you're listening to us. Give us that feedback. Jump onto our Facebook at A Magical Life Podcast and let us know what you want to hear. Are there any burning questions that you want us to seek coaches to help you find the answers, or that you just want us to answer one-on-one? Let us help you. Let us be an extension of your knowledge farming, of your idea farming. Let's get back to the root of it all. And again, go forth and create your magical life. Thanks for listening today. Please subscribe to hear future episodes, leave a review, and share this podcast. You can follow us on Facebook at A Magical Life Podcast or at Holistic Natural Health Australia. That's holistic with a W. You can find us on Instagram at Holistic Natural Health or at www.holisticnaturalhealth.com.au. That's where you'll access all sorts of articles, freebies, and more.